now. So welcome all of you who have joined. My name is Henrik Thuren. I'm responsible for product management at NetAdmin. And the idea today is to introduce you to one of the new product add-ons which we have released, which is the Fiber Installation Portal. And this is a new type of webinar that we plan on continuing doing. The idea is to introduce add-ons, product add-ons, as we release them. And the plan is to have another webinar soon on the Ticket SLA add-on. So we're going to try to keep this quite quick and to the point. Please ask questions at any time. I will keep track of the questions. You have a user interface in the tool which you can use to type in your questions, and I will go through the questions at the end of the webinar. All right, so today's add-on is the Fiber Installation Portal. And this is actually a portal targeted for a field technician or field installer that goes out to a premise, a household, and installs the fiber and typically installs the CPE. And what we're trying to do with this add-on is really to make sure that you don't have to visit the customer. As it says in the title here, never a second visit. You don't have to visit the customer a second time, at least not to correct anything which has been made by mistake. So we know that getting all the patching, connection, and splicing correct can be somewhat of a hassle, and especially if you are dependent on external subcontracting companies which you work with. So that's really goal of this add-on, to simplify that and make sure that all fiber installations are done correctly and also documented correctly. So this little three-step process illustrates what happens here. A field installer goes out to a premise, to a household. He or she connects either a laptop or maybe a Raspberry Pi with a small LCD screen, or a smartphone in some way to the broadband connection. And we automatically detect that this person is connected and redirects his web browser to the Fiber Installation Portal. And typically, if you have a point-to-point network, this is done by detecting the optional 82 parameters of the DHCP request, but there are multiple ways of doing that. And by the way, the examples that I'm going to run through today are based on a point-to-point network, but obviously this works in a GPON network as well, but slightly different. So the portal detects that we have an installer which is about to activate the premise, and the installer is displayed with a range of information on the portal, including technical details of the connection. And if we can measure signal levels on the fiber, we can present that. And the installer gets the possibility to check that the installation has been done correctly in terms of also the splicing and the patching. So I have tried to illustrate a typical setup here, that you have a CPE that you have just installed as a field installer. That CPE is through an optical network connected to a network access interface, and that's the interface that we detect in most scenarios. And enabled to work in the system with this customer, we have something called address or location. And depending on if you pre-allocate ports or not, we will either verify that the connection between the address and the interface is correct, or we'll actually give the field installer the opportunity to define that connection. And I will go through a couple of examples in the system to show you how this works in real life, so to speak. So 3 things comes out of this. You have a correct documentation of which households it's connected to which ports, and you get the verified address, and you get a ready-to-use connection, meaning that the actual inhabitants here in this household can start to order internet services or any kind of services they want. So as a last step of the fiber installation portal, you can redirect the user to a self-service portal, for example. All right, so let's have a look at what the fiber installation portal actually looks like and the most important aspects of it and how you can configure it. And so far I only mentioned field installers as user of this portal, but I should also mention that you can actually configure this portal to be used by the residents of the house instead of the field installer. The only difference then is that you have to have the port and address pre-mapped. So I will demonstrate this by going to a premise here. So this is a address in our demo system that we have here, Ulvegatan 4. And this is an address which has been not connected yet. So what we're doing right now is we are emulating that we are the field installer that has installed the fiber, have connected the CPE, and we're just about to activate the premise. So we have a button here called FIP, or Fiber Installation Portal Activation, which will give us the fiber installation portal. All right, so we can choose to tell the system that we are either a customer or field engineer. Obviously, in real life, you would configure just one of those, but let's go for the field engineer option, and we log in. And when we log in, we authenticate ourselves as a user. That user can belong to, for example, a subcontracting company that you're working with that helps you to actually do this type of work. And as we will see later on, we actually measure the number of connections that each user and each subcontractor has done. So let's go through. So we are now logged in to the fiber installation portal, and it consists of 3 different parts here. Technical details. So these are parameters that the fiber installation portal reads out from the network. So we can see the network interface, we can see the source IP and the source MAC address in this case. And obviously it's configurable which information that we present. The middle part is the mapping to the address. So as you can see, the fiber installation portal in this case has detected that, all right, based on the option 82 value and the mapping between that and the interface and the mapping between the interface and address, you live on this address. If that's not correct, something is probably wrong somewhere around the road. So it might be an incorrect splicing. It could be a patch cable which is wrong. And we get the opportunity to either correct that address or correct the problem that we have done in the network. As a sort of secondary confirmation step, you can have a validation code. And in this case, we use this code. So this can be used both to ensure that the field installer is actually activating the correct premise. In the case that you use the FIP for the end customer, you can also print out this activation code and send it to the customer, maybe as a part of their welcoming letter or something similar. And they have to use that specific code in order to confirm the activation of their address. And the third and last part, that's signal values. And what happens is that we can automatically detect for example, measured power levels on the fiber, if that can be read out from the CPE. You can also define that you need to manually input those values. Typically, it's only the RX power level, but you can define exactly which values that the field installer has to type in. And all of those values are stored and associated with this address. So you can always go back and check if you have a bad signal level. And we can report an issue. So what you can do is you can define different ticket flows. And in this case, we have a number of different issues here. Either my address is not listed, I cannot proceed to activate, or another issue. And the field installer can type in the information and contact details. So that's going to generate a ticket in the ticketing system and kick off a ticket flow, which can then be worked on. All right, so let's proceed and activate this address. All right, so that was it. In this last step, what could be done is that you can forward the browser directly to for example, a self-care or self-service portal. Or maybe you want to activate, let's say, a base service that can be configured as well. So let's jump back into the NetAdmin interface and see what has happened here. So if I update the overview of this address, we can see now that the network built-out status, as you might know, in NetAdmin 9 there are a number of network statuses on each address, and this is the built-out status that's now activated. So that basically indicates for the system that, okay, this address is now ready for service. So that's good. And we can also see exactly what has happened on this specific address. So this was actually the successful activation that we just did on this address. I'm going to quickly go to the configuration part of the fiber installation portal, where we'll also see the statistical data that we can get out of it. So let's go to settings and to fiber installation portal. Oh, I also should mention that obviously the installation portal is responsive, so you can use it on a smartphone or tablet or iPad, or whichever kind of device that your field technicians have. All right, so this is the configuration part. So this is where you configure whether an activation code is needed or not, whether technicians can use the portal. So if we will only have technicians using the portal here, we will probably configure it like this. In the case that we have pre-mapped all interfaces to all addresses, and we want the customer to do this last activation step themselves, we can do that. Then the activation code is mandatory. Whether to show a technical information or not, which ticket flow to initiate when the field installer wants to report an issue, the redirection URL that we use. In this case, it's the customer web portal of NetAdmin. And yes, okay, so you can also define exactly which address fields of the address that you show. And the last parts here are actually where you have your users of this portal. So if you're working with subcontractors, you can have an external company here. This would be the name of that company. Quite simple, a name, and you can activate it, and you have one of those providers for each subcontractor that you're working with, and the users here, they are mapped to the subcontracting company. And that also shows up here in the statistical part of the fiber installation portal. So if we look at the external company, we can see, for example, a graph of the granularity daily 3 months back. So let's have a look at that, or maybe weekly. So what this shows us is the number of activations for this external company the last 3 months. And as this is a demo system, it's not really that many. You can see it's 3 per day maximum. Okay, so that was a quick run through of the fiber installation portal. I should mention that the way that the portal detects your location in the network and reads out data from the network is defined by a plugin. So if you're unfamiliar with plugins, plugins are basically small components that you can implement yourself. We ship all products with default plugins. So the default plugins is going to be based on option 82 here, and it's going to read out some of the most basic technical details. In the same way, the last part that happens, the activation step, that's also plugin based. So you can quite dynamically change what the fiber installation portal should do once the activation has been confirmed. All right, so that was the presentation part. I'm gonna see if there are any questions, and I hope that you have found the interface for raising those questions. Let's see. All right, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to read out all questions and try to answer them. So during activation, is there the possibility to run a script to open the port when the technician activates the address? So you can make sure that really the CPE is connected to the correct interface. Yes, so what you can do is you can change the behavior of the fiber installation portal, let's say in the first and the last step. So the first thing that happens is that it basically, based on the source IP, it determines where your location is in the network. And that can be configured as a plugin. And the last part, what happens when you click on activate, can also be configured as a plugin. So is there a possibility to run a script to open the port when the technician activates the address? Yes, I assume, if I understood the question correctly, is that's something that you want to happen once you have done the activation, because otherwise, if the port would be completely disabled, you wouldn't even end up at the fiber installation portal. I hope I understood the question correctly. All right, so we got a couple of more questions here. So question number 2, regarding security, can this run on a separate server in a DMZ so that the actual NetAdmin is not exposed to the internet? Yes, I believe so, but let me double check that. What I know is that the fiber installation portal is based on AngularJS, so the communication between the fiber installation portal and NetAdmin is through an API, and I'm pretty sure that the let's say server end of the API can be hosted in a DMZ. All right, so third question, is it possible to get all the lyrics in Swedish in the Fiber installation? Yes, so the Fiber installation portal is a standard product, so just as you can have NetAdmin in itself in Swedish, you obviously can have the Fiber installation portal in Swedish, so it's supporting both Swedish and English. And a couple of other languages soon as well, maybe. All right, that seems to be all the questions. I wanted to thank each and every one of you for joining here today. And let's see, actually there's another question here. Let's take that. Is it possible to add own text or personal information to the installer? Yes, that's a good question. Yes, so that could be done by the validation plugin. So again, the validation plugin is a plugin that runs once you start the Fiber installation portal. So that could potentially pick up a text or a personal information that is stored in NetAdmin and shown to the installer. Yeah. So maybe like some guideline or something for the installer of how to actually use the portal. Yes. All right. Great. Again, we're going to have more of these types of webinars, and the next one is going to be on Ticket SLA. So I hope that this was informative, and looking forward to host more webinars. Thank you everyone for joining today, and see you soon again. Bye bye.